Wine sold in Alabama currently has a 30% tax built into its price. That means wines that are inexpensive have far less tax on them than some of the finer brands. Obviously, 30% of $2 is less than 30% of $6 or $7. But the state legislature may soon change all that. The last of Governor Wallace's 10 revenue enhancement measures is a bill to change the way wine is taxed, from a percentage of price to a fixed amount based on quantity. That means the tax on a bottle of cheap wine would be the same as the tax on an expensive bottle of the same size. The bill has the backing of the Alabama Wholesale Beer and Wine Association for several reasons. One, because it is expected to sharply cut paperwork involved in figuring the tax on wines of many different prices. And two, because it will make it easier for the state to be sure the right amount of tax is being collected by simply checking how many gallons have been sold. But the Wholesale Association thinks it will also mean a break for consumers, significantly lowering the cost of expensive wines while raising only slightly, if at all, the cost of cheap wines. In other words, if you like wine and your tastes are expensive, it may soon cost you less to have those tastes. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
All this abundance that we have provided for building thee a house for thy holy name comes from thy hand, and is all.
Then I'm going to take a shovel. Tell the chairman of our building committee if he take one of the shovels.
Some of the cats at the Montgomery Humane Shelter are crying to be brought home by someone. Others look as if they like it here just fine, thank you. June is the peak month for kittens to be born, and people are dumping them at the shelter in droves. 2 weeks ago, 60 more cats were brought in one day. They're averaging about 100 cats each week and having to put many to death.
You have a period of time when you don't have a kitten, people are begging for them. But right now, you could get any type, as you could see, about any type you want it from.
If you pick up a cat this month, you'll receive coupons for discounts on cat food and a free cat care book. All the Humane Shelter cats have their temporary shots and are wormed.
Now, if they purchase a kitten and they want to get it spayed or neutered for $20, they pay $10 at the time of purchase, and then $10 when they decide to get the spay or neuter done. And that's as cheap as you can get it anywhere, $20.
The Montgomery Humane Shelter is open Monday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Lisa Walsh, WSFA TV News.
Alabama jumped on top with a big 3-run first. No outs and runners on first and third. This is David Magadan lashing a hit back through the middle. Brett Elbin will circle third and score the game's first run. Another run will come in on a double play. Then Alan Stalling scores as Frank Valencia singles to right here. And after an inning, it's 3-zip Bama. Arizona State surged to the lead with a 4-run fifth. Runners on the corners. Here's Barry Bonds delivering a 2-out single, scoring Tim McNaughton. Steve Moses follows with this little Texas leaguer that nobody can get to in short center. It'll go as a double, scoring Bonds. The Sun Devils crossed twice more in the inning, and they took a 4-3 lead. But that was short-lived. In the bottom of the fifth, here's Magadan again en route to a World Series record 5 for 5 at the plate with another run-scoring single to tie it at 4. Stallings later followed with this single to left, scoring Jack Turek, and the Tide was back in the lead at 5-4. In the seventh, an Alabama error opened the way for the Sun Devils to tie it, and they do as Romy Kujan hits into this fielder's choice. That scores Don Wakamutsu, and it's tied at 5, where it would stay until the 11th. Win with 2 outs and runners on second and third. Craig Shipley grounds to the second baseman Greg Steen, who makes a slight bobble. When he recovers, it's too late to get the speedy Shipley. Valencia scores on the play, and Alabama beats Arizona State 6-5 at 11 innings. The Tide now moves to the winner's bracket, where they face Michigan on Tuesday night. This is action early in the second quarter with the game tied at 3. Birmingham's Ken Talton diving over from the 1 to give the Stallions a 10-3 lead. But it wouldn't last long. Tampa Bay quarterback Jimmy Jordan connects here with Danny Buggs for a 26-yard touchdown pass. That tied it back up at 10. The Bandits then broke the tie with this spectacular run. The rookie from Arkansas, Gary Anderson, on the misdirection and is off to the races. Anderson dashes 73 yards before being bumped out of bounds at the 1. He scored on the next play, 17-10 Bandits. Tampa Bay struck again right before half. Jordan to E.T. Eric Trevelyan for a 31-yard score. 24-10 Bandits at halftime. And with the heat well over 100 degrees on the field, the Bandits didn't cool off in the third quarter. Jordan lofts one here to Bugs, an 11-yard score, and Tampa Bay in command 31-10. How about one more? Still in the third quarter, Jordan this time to Willie Gillespie. 4 TD passes on the day for Jimmy Jordan. The Bandits roll to a 45-17 win. The Stallions fall 3 games off the pace in the Central Division with only 4 games remaining.
The concerned ministers for human rights denounced the latest police victim shooting incident. They held their news conference adjacent to the apartment in Tulane Court where 66-year-old Raymond McDade lived. All of the shooting incidents involving black men and the police in Montgomery and Eufaula have resulted in a cry from the concerned ministers that enough is enough.
Montgomery, Alabama, and many cities are drowning in the sea of hatred and corruptions. The moral fibers of this city have split down the middle. The giant of a man called racism is showing his face in the worst of ways.
Reverend Alford says a coalition of black leaders met recently with leaders from the white community to find solutions to Montgomery's racial problems.
They heard our voices but did not hear our cries.
The concerned ministers say the time has come to shake the economic foundation of Montgomery.
The black church will lend to all of her resources and all of her nonviolent strength in supporting the economic boycott in the form of a selective buying campaign. And the black church unanimously support the boycotting of the First Alabama Bank.
And ministers say they'll be with the marchers when they arrive in Montgomery Friday from their pilgrimage in Eufaula. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
In the meantime, some anonymous Montgomeryan is doing his part to foster better racial relations. Jack Smith, once again, has called black and white residents to come to a meeting of what he calls the Friendly Supper Club. Susan Silvernail is at Morrison's downtown, where the meeting is just underway. Susan?
Bob, Jack Smith, whoever he is, still doesn't want to step out from behind his pseudonym. In the invitation to tonight's dinner, he wrote that he doesn't want the Friendly Supper Club identified with any one group or individual.
Jack Smith was somewhere in this room on May 5th because he's since written he thought the first meeting of the Friendly Supper Club went fairly well. The people seemed to accept his idea that sharing a meal and conversation was a good way for blacks and whites to get to know each other. Jack Smith started the Friendly Supper Club because he's worried about race relations in Montgomery, and particularly about the brawl between the black Taylor family and 2 white policemen back in February. The only ground rule for participation in the club is to invite someone of the opposite race.
Jack Smith says the Friendly Supper Club isn't an end in itself. He writes that the point is to develop interracial friendships like any other friendships until they become commonplace. And Bob, we're going in to have dinner with the Supper Club ourselves, so it's back to you.
Thanks very much, Susan. We'll have more on that meeting tonight at 10 o'clock.
This is what we know about Jack Smith. He prefers anonymity. He could be any one of the 70 people who came to eat together at Morrison's tonight. By his letters, he's someone who feels Montgomery is in trouble and wants to do something about it. And the people who have responded to these anonymous appeals for better race relations feel like Jack Smith is onto something good.
We need to talk. That's the only way we get problems resolved.
That's really needed in Montgomery. I think we've got a serious problem right now, and it seems like some of our politicians are trying to minimize it, but the problem exists.
You have to get down to the grassroots of people and let them try to solve problems rather than sometimes it being solved in a vacuum.
After the Supper Club's first meeting last month, Smith wrote the real test would be how far the group's message spread. We presume then he was pleased to see nearly twice as many people show up tonight.
Jack Smith wrote that the Friendly Supper Club isn't an end in itself, that the point is to develop interracial friendships, like any other friendships, until they become commonplace. Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
In this country, in Montgomery, Alabama, there's a mystery surrounding a dinner last night designed to promote racial harmony. Here's Kenley Jones.
No, I'm not. How about you, sir? I'm not Jack Smith.
I'm not Jack Smith.
No, I'm not. No.
None of the more than 60 Montgomery citizens who attended the Friendly Supper Club meeting at a downtown cafeteria last night would admit to being Jack Smith, the club's anonymous founder. Smith began sending invitations to the club's meetings last month in an effort to promote racial harmony in the city. Montgomery has been the scene of several ugly incidents between blacks and police during the past few months. Less than 24 hours before last night's meeting of the Supper Club, a cross was burned on the lawn of Montgomery County Commissioner John Knight, who has accused city officials of indifference to alleged civil rights violations. Knight is a member of the Friendly Supper Club. The only requirement for membership set down by Jack Smith is that each person brings someone of another race to get to know each other better.
I think we're going to need a broader representation of people attending functions like this, city officials and people like that, in order to really make this a meaningful and significant event.
In a letter announcing this meeting, the mysterious Jack Smith said most of those who have joined the Friendly Supper Club already have interracial friendships. That, he said, is like preaching to the converted, whereas the goal is to expand the membership to include those who do not have friends of another race, at least not yet. Kenley Jones, NBC News, Montgomery, Alabama.
A closed-door meeting, and out of that meeting came a unanimously decision when will the forces of evil stop in this city? Shooting after shooting, killing after killing. Another black man was shot most recently by the Montgomery Police Department. We call upon the District Attorney Office to make sure that the arms of justice are not shortened. Double standards must perish from this city. Press release statement, and after reading the press release statement, we will entertain any questions that you might have. This is coming from concerned ministers for human rights.
Representative James Warren on the right and Walter Penry on the left, and Representative Dwight Falk in the center, were the only legislators spotted at the Monroe County Open House. The Monroe County Chamber of Commerce was trying to gain some publicity for what it feels is a unique blend of industry and government.
Other than the fact that we have a great place to live and a good school system, we have the unique capabilities of having county and city government working together with industry, and plus that gives it the climate to I think, have jobs in progress.
One example shown the three legislators is a $23 million bridge project to replace the Claiborne Bridge, a project former House Speaker Joe McCorkadale says had the backing and planning of industry.
It's real popular politically, as these fellas know, to get on the floor of the House and to get on the stump and talk about the big views and how they do all these things and do all those things, you know, and be critical and all of that. But boy, I'll tell you what, these fellas are working out here today. This project is underway, and there's all the millions of dollars involved because of the, quote, big muse putting in some money.
No one's sure why more legislators didn't show up, but one person said it's not surprising considering it was a business publicity effort directed toward a labor-oriented legislature. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
The only project that's ever begun as this did, and initially it started as it did. Let me back up just a little bit on, you know, this.
Everything seems to cost more these days: housing, food, utilities, and going to school. Auburn University, like other schools around the country, is facing an economic crunch. And the Board of Trustees is trying to find ways to keep their bills paid, and their answer is raising student fees. Beginning in January 1984, winter quarter, it'll cost state students $30 more to go to school. The flat fee is increasing from $330 to $360. And for out-of-state students, it'll cost $70 more, up from $760 to $830. For vet school students, the across-the-board increase is the same. In-state students will pay $460, that's up from $430, and out-of-staters will pay $1,060 instead of $990. But these fees aren't the only changes Auburn may see. A bill has been filed in the state Senate to increase the number of trustees by 3 and change the way they're selected. Jacob Walker has been pushing for this bill.
The idea is, though, that this would give the board itself more say into how new members are selected. It would give them, through the screening process, also a method of picking themselves.
Mr. Walker says a change isn't all that important, but it would be an improvement. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News at Auburn University.
Some outside control as well, because the screening committee would be composed of people appointed by a rather wide segment of Alabama.
Major alteration and repair accounts. Also, that certain other funds be transferred from the Auburn University at Montgomery current unrestricted funds to the plant fund. I'd like to recommend that to the board.
This bill necessary for the rather long list of fees, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. The only significant increases or changes are in the regular university fee.
We have something like 20% unemployed in the white youth and 40% unemployed in the black youth. And the chamber is trying to alert its members to do everything that they can to create new jobs and to fill existing ones.
What types of jobs? You're talking about summer employment. What types of jobs are you talking about?
Well, we have nothing particular in mind, but we would like that any job, particularly the youth can fill, 16 to 19, that they be offered the opportunity to fill these jobs.
I cannot be intimidated by cowardly acts like this, or any acts. The only thing this does, it gives me courage to continue doing what I'm doing and to stand up for justice for all people. And I'm dedicated to that philosophy and that principle, and regardless to what might happen in terms of cross burnings and things of this nature, then I'm determined to fight for justice and equality for all people.
These are the charred remains of a 10-foot cross left burning in Commissioner John Knight's driveway about 1:30 this morning. Commissioner Knight says he didn't know about the burning cross until a neighbor called. Mrs. Stella Person, who lives next door, says she saw the cross burning while she was saying goodbye to company.
I was so afraid I didn't know what I was doing. I was shaking all over. I called him, and then his wife said, hang up the phone and call the police. I hung up the phone and called 911.
Commissioner Knight says he immediately called the police and fire departments. He says the police responded within 5 minutes and helped him put out the blaze with the water hose. Commissioner Knight, who's the spokesman for a group of blacks boycotting First Alabama Bank, says he doesn't know who might have left the burning cross.
I cannot be intimidated by cowardly acts like this, or any acts. The only thing this does, it gives me courage to continue doing what I'm doing and to stand up for justice for all people. And I'm dedicated to that philosophy and that principle, and regardless to what might happen in terms of cross burnings and things of this nature, then I'm determined to fight for justice and equality for all people.
Commissioner Knight says he did receive some threatening phone calls last Friday night, but he says he didn't pay much attention to them. After this morning's incident, he says he'll treat similar cases more seriously. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
Alabama jumped on top with a big 3-run first. No outs and runners on first and third. This is David Magadan lashing a hit back through the middle. Brett Elbin will circle third and score the game's first run. Another run will come in on a double play. Then Alan Stalling scores as Frank Valencia singles to right here. And after an inning, it's 3-zip Bama. Arizona State surged to the lead with a 4-run fifth. Runners on the corners. Here's Barry Bonds delivering a 2-out single, scoring Tim McNaughton. Steve Moses follows with this little Texas leaguer that nobody can get to in short center. It'll go as a double, scoring Bonds. The Sun Devils crossed twice more in the inning, and they took a 4-3 lead. But that was short-lived. In the bottom of the fifth, here's Magadan again en route to a World Series record 5 for 5 at the plate with another run-scoring single to tie it at 4. Stallings later followed with this single to left, scoring Jack Turek, and the Tide was back in the lead at 5-4. In the seventh, an Alabama error opened the way for the Sun Devils to tie it, and they do as Romy Kujan hits into this fielder's choice. That scores Don Wakamutsu, and it's tied at 5, where it would stay until the 11th. Win with 2 outs and runners on second and third. Craig Shipley grounds to the second baseman Greg Steen, who makes a slight bobble. When he recovers, it's too late to get the speedy Shipley. Valencia scores on the play, and Alabama beats Arizona State 6-5 at 11 innings. The Tide now moves to the winner's bracket, where they face Michigan on Tuesday night.
Montgomery Saturday march against police terror. As it stands now, policemen can decide on the spot to shoot and kill you just because you look suspicious and you may not have done anything. And that is the law in Alabama. Very good.
It is passing.
All right.
I will definitely be back. Hey.
Very good.
Appreciate that.
God bless you.
To see things going on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take it easy, man.
Thank you. And people who even were reluctant to sign heard our message and were very warm in welcoming us. And they know that we've been here.
The time has come and is long overdue to end the racist attitudes and practices that hold down black people and delay the realization by our region and nation of its full human potential. We're calling upon the political leadership of this city to assert its leadership toward that end.
We didn't just become interested in race relationship in our community. We've been doing this for a long time. And we are sincere in our efforts in trying to bring about better race relationship among all of our people.
I think it indicates that what was done, the cross burning, etc., is not reflective of the entire white community in the city, and that this is a start to better race relations in the city of Montgomery. And I will do anything to foster better racial relations here in the city of Montgomery that I possibly can. I don't think that the biracial committee should be a political committee. And that's the difference. I think, like the supper club meeting that we had last night, I think that those are people that are genuinely interested in fostering better racial relations. I don't want to be used as a political tool for anybody's candidate or campaign or anything of that nature. And I think that where people are sincere about better racial relations, then something can be done. All of those people that were appointed to the biracial committee, why were they not at the supper club meeting? If they're genuinely interested in better racial relations, this is all that I'm saying.
Maybe have it right here.
Do you, this goes inside.
Okay, thank you. I think it indicates that what was done, the cross burning, etc., is not reflective of the entire white community in the city, and that this is a start to better race relations in the city of Montgomery, and I will do anything to foster better racial relations here in the city of Montgomery that I possibly can.
Would you recommend now that their blacks serve on this?
About 200 prospective jurors were subpoenaed to appear at the Tallapoosa County Courthouse this morning in an effort to come up with 14 people who are qualified to serve on the jury. Security was unusually tight. Everyone entering the courtroom was searched by state troopers and sheriff's deputies. Officers used metal detectors to search for hidden weapons. Judge James Avery barred cameras from the courtroom while prospective jurors or spectators were inside. After 2.5 hours of questioning by Judge Avery, the number of prospective jurors had dwindled to about 70. When the court reconvened after lunch, Judge Avery announced the remaining prospective jurors would be interviewed individually by prosecution and defense lawyers in another chamber. Reporters were not allowed to observe. Selection of the jury is expected to last the rest of the week. Judge Avery had basically 2 warnings at today's proceedings. The first to lawyers for the defense and prosecution, not to discuss the case with members of the news media. As the judge put it, this case will be tried in this courtroom and not on the front pages of newspapers or on radio and television. The second warning went to prospective jurors. He told them should they be chosen to serve on the jury next week, they could expect to be sequestered or, as the judge put it, locked up for the duration of the trial with no outside contact. The jury is expected to be struck and testimony to begin Monday. Mac Carmack, WSFA TV News in Dadeville.
State Water Report.
Finance and taxation, rules, judicial, governmental affairs.
That would include
Morgan County. The laws and parts of law and the include the Constitution of 1901 as amended, which are in conflict.
More to make it as powerful than the bill in the federal form. But one of the key amendments is going to be coming from Representative Owen. And
no district that I didn't know that this was a bad bill. If that's so, then perhaps this bill going to time the house all day, carry this bill over temporarily. Mr. Speaker, I'm calling for the ayes and noes now.
Let me invite your attention to page 2 of the bill, and you'll see that our sentence line or whatever is declared illegal, unconstitutional, or whatever. It does not affect the remaining section.
If now vote no with me on this, please.
The clerk will unlock the machine and remember that vote.
Biggest events that have been created by man. Banking and insurance, commerce, transportation, utility. City Bill 411 of the Federal Report.
All in favor, let it know by saying aye.
It's still like a dream.
When were you notified, and what did they tell you?
I received a phone call on May the 19th at 1:30 in the afternoon, and Miss Finley called and identified herself and asked if I knew that I had won a prize. And I told her that I remembered that I had received a letter in February saying that I was being considered for one. And she said, well, I had won one. Did I know what I won? And I said, no. She asked me if there was anyone there with me, and I said, only my 3-year-old grandson. She said, I think you better sit down. And she said, you've won $50,000.
I hear 41 times. I stayed here 11 and a half years. I had 8 years, 9 months, and I built those jobs. That's the last. Stayed with that all the time.
These are the marchers, only 100 strong this past Saturday, kicking off their pilgrimage, demonstrating their concern over the deaths of 2 black brothers shot by white police officers from Eufaula. On Friday, the marchers will arrive in Montgomery and trek down Ripley and Columbus Streets to the First Baptist Church as a prelude to Saturday's rally. The Friday portion wasn't in the original plans, but was proposed by Councilman Donald Watkins today. The 2-mile march will get underway at 10:30 and will last about 35 minutes. SCLC Representative Reverend John Alford says the demonstrators will come into town by van off I-85 at the Union Avenue exit. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
The court said that the Attorney General's opinion was not correct, and in Act 618 had not been repealed. We are now back to square one, which is election to the ordinance that we passed before, setting up certain election machinery. That's it. June, 10 p.m. Officers identified themselves, forced fire, and killed Mr. McDay, subject McDay.
You watch David in the batting cage. He's got one of those different batting styles. Everyone's different, and whatever works, don't complain. He patterned himself after Dave Parker, the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Well, it might be for somebody else, but that's where I feel comfortable. I've always felt that to be a good hitter, you got to bat the way you feel comfortable. And that just happens to be the way I feel comfortable, and that's the main thing.
In last Saturday's game, in which Alabama won over ASU, Arizona State's head coach Jim Brock told his pitcher to do everything possible to stop Madigan. Nothing worked. He went 5 for 5, tying a series record. And what impressed Coach Brock was the way David positioned his hands on the bat.
I like to have my hands close to my body, and a lot of guys like to have them away from their body, but I like to have them in close because I hit the ball a lot to left field. I think to hit the ball to left field, you have to have your hands in close to, you know, to get that full swing to left field.
Alabama's noted for its football, but watching this guy hit, you forget all about Bama football in the month of June, especially if you're in the College World Series.
Chief Nakahoma led the charge for the Braves tonight, breathing fire to get that team going. Attaboy, Chief. But it was the Dodgers who got on the scoreboard first. Pascual Perez delivers to Pedro Guerrero, and he unloads one in the second inning to left. This was a home run as soon as it left the bat. L.A. leads 1-0. But then things started going the Braves' way. Rick Monday hits a ground ball up the middle, off Glenn Hubbard's glove, into Rafael Ramirez's. The throw to first in time for a double play. Then in the 7th inning, trailing 1-0, Big Bob Horner steps up to the plate, hits a ground ball down the third baseline. Pedro Guerrero with a long throw. It's in the dirt, past Greg Brock at first. Rolls to the tarp. Rounding third, Dale Murphy. He'll try to score. Brock's throw is a little wild. Murphy is in to tie the game at 1. Later, the Braves took the lead. In the 8th inning, Claudell Washington then provided the crushing blast with a home run off Bob Welsh, a 2-run shot, and the Braves go on to beat the Dodgers 4-1. I'm Dennis Quinn for NBC News.
In Montgomery, Alabama, the Friendly Supper Club has only one rule. To get into the Dutch Street Supper, you must bring a guest of a different race. A month ago, 35 showed up. But last night, as Kenley Jones reports, there were 60.
A small group of blacks and whites stood in the rain at Montgomery County Commissioner John Knight's house to replace the burned cross, a symbol of prejudice and hate, with rose bushes, which they planted as another kind of symbol.
One we hope will grow along with greater awareness among white Montgomeryans of the need to end racial bigotry and injustice.
Knight is the spokesman for a coalition of blacks who have accused Montgomery's white power structure of being indifferent to alleged civil rights violations. The idea of planting flowers at Knight's house was born at last night's meeting of the Friendly Supper Club, whose purpose is to promote racial harmony. The club's founder calls himself Jack Smith, but he has never identified himself to fellow members, who answer his call once a month.
There are people of goodwill in Montgomery, Alabama, who wish to have racial harmony and wish to live in peace here.
But Montgomery has been the scene of several ugly incidents between blacks and police during the past few months. Attempts by the city's tough-talking law and order mayor, Emery Falmer, to name a biracial committee to study civil rights complaints has met resistance from black city councilmen who accuse him of stacking the committee in his favor. John Knight is a member of the Friendly Supper Club. He says other politicians should join.
The people that are causing the problems are the people that you can't get to come to functions like this.
An editorial in the Montgomery Advertiser this morning criticized leaders of both sides, black and white, for being more interested in political posturing than in solving racial problems. The paper said the Friendly Supper Club is an indication that the hunger for harmony in the city is far more widespread than the politicians seem to realize. Kenley Jones, NBC News, Montgomery, Alabama.
That's Nightly News for Tuesday. I'm Roger Mudd in Washington.
Alabama power officials say Scott Paper Company can't afford its planned $300 million expansion, but has found a way to pass the cost on to other power company customers. The paper company plans to build a power generating facility and wants new laws to require Alabama Power to buy any excess electricity they produce. The problem, according to power company officials, is that they would have to buy energy from Scott at more than double the cost that Scott pays for power from the utility.
The Scott Paper Company welfare bill would add about $50 to $60 to the average electric customer's bill annually over the next decade.
Alabama Power already has agreements with Scott and 16 other Alabama companies for those companies to generate part or all of the power needed for their own operations. The utility does buy excess energy from those companies, but that's at a much lower rate than would be required in the bills before the legislature. Of course, while Alabama Power is warning their customers of what they say are the dangers of the new bill, Scott Paper is not standing idly by. This afternoon, Scott officials will meet with Governor Wallace, presumably to ask his support for the bill. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
As a show of strength and unity, local and state black leaders met on the Capitol steps with the leader of the pilgrimage, Dr. Joseph Lowry, president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. One aim of the SCLC's 7-day march and motorcade is to garner support for the repeal of the state's fleeing felon statute, a law that governs when a police officer may fire his weapon.
This is one of the very few states in the nation that has this kind of law, which says that in the opinion of the police officer, that if he feels that his life might be in danger, that he can pull his pistol and shoot anytime he wants to.
While Representative Holmes is willing to lend his support to the SCLC, some of the black leaders in towns like Union Springs or Phoenix City, where the pilgrimage has traveled, have not.
We think that efforts to create doubt about the efficacy or efficiency are misdirected and misappropriated and ill-founded.
The pilgrimage arrives in Montgomery on Friday. Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
Scott Paper in Mobile is planning a $300 million expansion and replacement program for its energy-generating facilities. Scott officials say that will create 1,000 new jobs, and by lowering the company's dependence on oil and natural gas, give greater stability to the jobs of 4,000 other workers.
The passage in the legislature is a very important element.
To do all this, Scott wants the legislature to pass a bill that would force Alabama Power to buy any excess electricity Scott produces. But there's the stumbling block.
We have adequate reserves and capacity, and we do not need additional capacity.
Alabama Power says it would have to pay more for Scott's extra electricity than Scott would have to pay to buy it back.
The Scott Paper Company welfare bill would add about $50 to $60 to the average electric customer's bill annually over the next decade.
I don't think anybody has in mind any legislation that would pass any rate cost to anyone else, especially residential customers.
Scott officials say their plant will use almost all the electricity the new generating unit can produce, but they admit they may sell it all to Alabama Power and buy back what they need. Although Scott Paper has been involved in cogeneration with the utility for some time, Scott officials say the new legislation, if passed, will protect them by guaranteeing they'll make money on their investment. Alabama Power is afraid it could set a bad precedent that might lead the utility to an unwanted and, they say, dangerous dependence on other companies to supply power. Alabama Power says Scott Paper is attempting to blackmail the state by threatening to cut back their operations in Mobile. Scott Paper says Alabama Power is just a monopoly that doesn't want to lose any of its strength. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News. The Scott Paper Company in Mobile employs about 4,000 people, workers whose jobs are in jeopardy according to company officials unless Scott can make the Mobile plant more profitable. To do that, Scott is proposing a $300 million renovation of its energy-generating facilities and asking the state legislature to make Alabama Power buy any extra electricity they produce.
And I think it's most important to note the project would have no negative financial impact on any citizen of Alabama or any corporation in Alabama, including at the Alabama Power Company.
Not true, according to the utility.
The Scott Paper Company welfare bill would add about $50 to $60 to the average electric customer's bill annually over the next decade.
Power company officials say Scott Paper is having financial trouble and is trying to regain its footing by making other power customers pay the bill. That's a notion rejected by both Governor George Wallace and the man who's backing Scott Paper in the legislature, Representative J.E. Turner.
Probably the biggest concern is the fact that they're seeing some competition as it relates to generating, and this is naturally a concern. It would be a concern of anybody's, I would imagine.
Alabama Power says it will cost more to buy power produced by Scott Paper than Scott will pay to buy it back. Scott Paper says Alabama Power is just a monopoly that doesn't want to lose any of its strength, making this, in more ways than one, a power struggle. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Well, that's just another one of the many rumors. I'm thinking about the next race right now. I'm making plans for the next race, and that's the reason I'm so active in this industry hunting.
One of the ideas the Wallace administration has come up with to pump more money into the state's general fund is to earmark future markups on liquor sold through a state store. Administration spokesmen say this will raise $4.7 of the $36 million they say will be needed to keep next year's general fund budget at this year's already prorated level. But all of this depends on the ABC board increasing the markup by 5% and the legislature approving the diversion of the extra money. The House of Representatives has approved the legislation. The Senate Finance and Taxation Committee took the matter up today during a discussion interrupted several times when senators discovered that they'd been given the wrong version of the bill. Senator Roger Bedford of Russellville, under the impression that the bill would give the general fund only 5% of the anticipated increase, offered an amendment to turn all of the increase over to the general fund. That idea was adopted. Later, administration spokesman Farrell Patrick said the Bedford amendment made no difference because that's what the bill was designed to do. He says he didn't try to explain that point because he knew the administration had enough votes on the committee to pass it anyway. The bill and the other so-called enhancements could be acted on by the full Senate next week. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Some courtroom observers felt yesterday that negotiations were underway for a guilty plea, but attorneys were barred from discussing the case because of a gag order from Circuit Court Judge James Avery. This morning it was confirmed that Danny Ash would plead guilty to the murder and kidnapping charges if sentenced to life in prison without parole. Assistant District Attorney Mitch Gavin says in cases like this, the prosecution would not accept the agreement unless approved by the victim's family. In this case, Wendy Mansell's family agreed to the plea bargain.
The offer was that a guilty plea be taken in exchange for a life without parole sentence, and the negotiations were simply whether that was acceptable both to the family of the victim and to the family of Danny Ash, as well as Danny himself. We deemed it to be in our client's best interest to advise him that a guilty plea in exchange for a life without parole sentence was in his best interest.
After officially accepting the guilty plea from Ash, Judge Avery sentenced the young man to life without parole and ordered him transported to Kilby Correctional Facility. At the prison, officials say Ash will be housed there for 30 days for classification, but they're not sure what facility he'll be assigned to for the rest of his life.
Cancer, lung, or heart diseases combined. In Alabama, approximately 4,000
understanding and felt that this should be done, that the language of people just...
Their confidentiality in their decision making.
That's what you and Mo both there about Bennett has enough experience to keep y'all in mind. He's not even eligible to up and talk to you.
No, and that
As they've done throughout the playoffs, the Crimson Tide got off to an impressive start with a two-run first. Leadoff man Brett Elvin stunned Michigan starter Dave Koff with this long home run over the right field wall to get it all started. After Ted McClendon singled and moved to second on a pass ball, David Magadan continued his incredible hitting, driving a single up the middle to score McClendon. In the third, the Tide struck again. Frank Valegia singles to left. That will score Rob Skates to make it 3-0 Alabama. To the fourth now. Here's Magadan again, and again he delivers. This single to right scores Craig Shipley and sets a new College World Series record for 8 consecutive hits. Magadan finished the ninth 3 for 4 and drew an intentional walk. He also scored a run later in the fourth when Alan Stallings lines this single to center. It was 6-0 Bama after 3.5. In the bottom of the fourth, the Wolverines began to chip away at that big lead. Casey Close lined this double to the gap in right center off Tide starter Rick Brown. Ken Haywood, the runner on first, circles the bases to put Michigan on the board. Close later scored on a wild pitch, and Rich Baer delivered this run-scoring single down the right field line to cut the Bama lead to 6-3. In the sixth, Michigan gets another. This is Barry Larkin ripping a Brown pitch that heads to the wall over the center fielder's head. Rich Baer will score all the way from first. Larkin slides into third with a triple. It's 6-4 Alabama. Things then got tense in the 7th when Jeff Jacobson singles sharply in the hole between third and short off reliever Tim Meacham. Chris Sabo crosses with the Wolverines' 5th run, and suddenly it's a 1-run ball game. Meacham set the Wolverines down in the 8th and had 2 outs in the 9th when trouble again arose. With runners on first and second, Troy Broccoli comes in to face pinch hitter Chuck Froning, and on this 3-2 pitch, Froning grounds out to Shipley at short to end the game. Bama takes a hard-fought 6-5 win over Michigan to remain unbeaten in the College World Series. They face the tournament's only other undefeated team, number 1 Texas, Thursday night. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
We hope to overcome those obstacles that are presented now that we've lost those players. One guy, Jim Smith, was projected to be a starting wide receiver. Ray Penny, offensive tackle, was the starting offensive tackle, and a reserve guard in Tyrone McGriff. So we're going to definitely miss those people. We have some quality people that are behind them, but we don't know about those people. They hadn't had an opportunity to be in there. They don't have the experience, but we are very optimistic about the prospects of them getting in there and doing a good job.
Is John Stallworth considering the new league?
The new league is a viable option for me. I am a free agent right now. I don't have a contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're negotiating and talking to some other people. Don't want to particularly go into that right now, but again, the new league is an option that I do have.
Dusty Baker got the Dodgers going in the 1st inning. He takes Rick Camp's delivery deep to left center field with a man aboard. 2-run homer for Baker. The Dodgers jumped out to a 2-0 lead. Fernando Valenzuela began his show at the plate in the 4th, leading 4-1. He reps a sharp single to center. That brings Dave Anderson in to score. The Dodgers coasting along 5-1. But he wasn't the only pitcher hitting this day. Atlanta's Rick Behena belts one off Valenzuela to left. His first career home run. That made it 5-3 Dodgers. Pedro Guerrero, he had a big night, going 4 for 5, one of them a home run right here off Donnie Moore to right center field. His 13th of the season, making it 9-3. The Braves went through 4 pitchers tonight, and then in the 8th, Fernando again gets all of this one. The result, his first homer of the year, the 2nd of his career. Valenzuela, 3 RBIs today as the Dodgers beat the Braves 11-5. This is Scott Clark reporting for NBC News.
And we have not tried to do that. We just call them. We're talking about wives of young black men. We're talking about young black ladies being taken advantage of by the Montgomery Police Department. And these are not problems that the black community take lightly or consider overreacting when we voice our opinions in objection to them.
Do y'all have any weapons?
Not in the car.
Do y'all have any weapons?
Not in the car.
$85,000 children enrolled in special education classes in Alabama. That number is expected to go up next year. The gifted, as well as the mildly retarded and severely handicapped, are all considered special students who require special attention. And to make sure each special student is properly trained, the State Board of Education recently hired a panel of experts to study what problems exist in the area of teacher certification for special education. The experts found and recommended to the board that 6 areas of special education certification remain separate, but 2 should be combined. Those certification areas deal with children who are mildly and severely mentally handicapped. A problem began in the certification areas as a result of what some experts say was over-certification of teachers.
Some changes not made. We'll soon have teachers with very little preparation teaching these youngsters. So the effort is to make a stronger, better program for exceptional children, not the other way.
If the changes are adopted, they would not affect those teachers already certified in certain areas. In fact, they can broaden their certification. The board decided it needed to study the proposal more before voting on it in its July meeting. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News at the State Board of Education.
Officer Brown was taken into the Montgomery County Courthouse on a stretcher. He was wearing a body cast, a result of 2 bullets that struck him during the incident on Todd Road last February. Officer Brown and Officer Ed Spivey entered this house that night, chasing a young man police say had fought with Officer Spivey only moments earlier. But exactly what happened that led the officers into the house and what happened after they got there is still uncertain. Police claim the 2 officers were beaten by numerous people inside the house for as long as 20 minutes, even though they say the officers repeatedly identified themselves. But the residents of the house tell a different story. They say the plainclothes officers did not identify themselves and that they were only trying to control the 2 men until police arrived. What is known is that Officer Brown was shot, Officer Spivey was injured, and 4 people are now charged with attempted murder in the case. All 4 of those people have claimed that they were beaten by police during questioning. Officer Brown, how do you feel? How it all adds up is a question the grand jury will have to answer, but there may be many more questions. There are indications this special grand jury is also looking into 3 other recent shootings involving Montgomery police. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery County Courthouse. The meeting started off with a half-hour discussion of whether the meeting should be open or closed to reporters and photographers. It was kept open. From there, the committee went on to decide exactly what they'll be meeting for.
To strengthen racial harmony and friendships in the city of Montgomery through positive programs. And accomplishing this objective, we'll seek to involve a large number of citizens who are committed to the growth of Montgomery and whose motives are to help others.
The committee is also going to contact those 3 city councilmen who chose not to appoint anyone to the committee. Committee members would like those councilmen to change their minds. The committee plans to meet every 2 weeks to look at race relations in Montgomery. They voted to report the proceedings of each meeting to the mayor and all city councilmen, but they say the committee will in no way be accountable to those elected officials. However, they say the committee will be accountable to the community at large. To that extent, the committee will also be looking for ideas from the public on what they need to look at. Part of that may include involving students from local schools giving their ideas about how to improve race relations. Some committee members say they feel there is already some suspicion about the motives or true intent of the committee. That's why they say they want to get as many people involved from the community at large as soon as possible. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.